Okay, welcome to the beautiful Betty Rodriguez Regional Library. We're very glad to have you today. Before we begin talking in more depth about librarianship and how it's changed and some of the implications of that, could you just please maybe give our listeners, our viewers, a sense of who you are? You know, what are your names? What's your background in librarianship?
Well, my name is Penny Hill, and as of the end of this month, I'll have 43 years in as a librarian with Fresno County Library.
Wow.
So, I was an English major, and when English majors either teach or you become a librarian, and I really like working with kids, and I thought, I could be a children's librarian, and I wouldn't have them all day. I mean, I could, you know, it sounds awful, but I could have good times with them. I wouldn't have to give them grades, so.
And so have you mainly specialized in children's librarianship?
Well, that's how I started off, as a children's librarian, and then I started growing up. I became the bookmobile librarian, and then I became a branch librarian, which I nearly put in 26 years at Selma doing that.
Wow.
Before I got moved to being a cluster librarian and then being down at the Central Library.
So a diverse range of experience.
Diverse range, yes.
All right, and how about you, Faye?
My name's Fae Giffen, and my experience as a librarian is not nearly that in-depth. I have been a librarian for a little bit less than a year. I will have been at Fresno County Public Library a year next month. And before that, I worked as a library assistant at a few places for about 6 months before I was hired at Fresno County Public Library. The majority of my career experience was actually in politics. I worked as the communications director for a city council member here in Fresno, and was really always referring people to the public library for everything, basically. Free computers, free books, free Wi-Fi, tax forms, someplace to sit while you're waiting for an appointment someplace else downtown, and especially during the recession, when I was still working at the council member's office, and between like 07 and 10, when the recession was hitting Fresno County very badly, we were getting a lot of calls from people who needed a lot of services, a lot of people needing social services for the first time in their entire lives, and at the same time, a lot of places were closing that provided those services due to lack of funding. So I just kept telling people to go to the library for all kinds of things, because I didn't know where else to send them, and and then through that, I eventually ended up talking with staff, especially at the Central Downtown branch, asking them because at a certain point I just felt bad. I'm like, I'm sending so many people your way. Is this the right thing to do? And that's how I sort of became interested in how libraries kind of interact with their community. And then when I was looking for a grad program, getting an MLIS made a lot of sense.
All right, so I mean, it sounds like both of your career paths were in a way kind of roundabout. You know, what your original field of study was shifted in kind of an intuitive way to libraries. So a lot of it is implied a lot of the answer is probably implied in what you've already said, but what makes you so passionate about serving the community through the library? Like why do you believe in librarianship, I guess? I know that's a very weighty question, but
I think because I was at Selma so long, I became part of the community. I was encouraged to do that. I was encouraged to take leadership Selma. I started doing things, with the community and in the community. I was, the librarian, Miss Penny, and it was so cool. I mean, not everything was, we had our own problems down there, but as far as kids and stuff, but it was just, you're part of the community. You're considered to be that way.
I think for me, if you're around about my age, like if you're part of Gen X, born in like the 70s, you've spent your whole life seeing this like reduction in public space, that we've moved further and further and further away from public space. Like we've moved to gated communities and not wanting people to even walk down the street on public streets, and like lack of funding for parks, especially like when I was younger. And you're still seeing that to a great degree, that we have moved to paths that isolate ourselves from our neighbors instead of like inviting our neighbors into our lives, and a lot of isolation basically. And I feel like public libraries have remained that one public space where there's really no barrier to entry. Like you sort of basically have to not be causing a very large problem. But there's no fee to get in. There's no real substantial dress code. There's no if you can get there, you are welcome to be there. And we don't have many places like that in our communities anymore. And I think that's something that should be protected and really fought for.
Yeah. So. Faye just touched a little bit about on, kind of how she's observed this like reduction of public space over time, and how libraries are helping preserve some public space and kind of, providing a neutral zone for people to be. Have you observed sort of similar changes over your career? Do you feel like the library is becoming more relevant to people as time goes on, or has librarianship changed substantially since you started?
I think it's changed somewhat, but we still have I hope we still have the core beliefs and ways that we do things. I noticed one of the questions when I first started as a librarian, as a children's librarian, and got out into the branches, we didn't have computers. We had the card catalog. So you didn't know what Cedar Clinton, which before Betty turned into Betty, you didn't know if you were downtown who had what. You would have to call around and say, or a customer, a library patron would have to call around and say, what do you have this? Because the information was kept upstairs in tubs, little cards, again, little cards. And they had to somebody had to type up overdue notices and that kind of thing. But I think we wanted to give good service. We wanted to find things for our people, and it was the knowledge that you got by working with the books. You knew that okay, maybe this book doesn't have it, but the one sitting next to it, the same number, the same Dewey number, it has what they need,
And so do you feel like since we've automated a lot of that stuff that we're now able to connect to patrons more, or customers?
Customers more, because they can see what another county has and hopefully borrow it and return it. So that's very good, very good.
Yeah, I think our ability to share information is amazing. I think that that you can come into the Fresno County Public Library and you can request a book that may only exist in one branch very far away, and we can get it for you, and it's a free service, and you don't need to pay a lot of money to a rare book dealer. You don't need to travel. You don't need, again, it's just lowering the barriers to information so that information isn't a privilege. It is something you have a right to access, and that everybody has the same right to access information and be aware of their world and have their questions answered.
So Faye, you have a very unique position with Fresno County Public Library as a community librarian, and I think in some ways a lot of what you do is core to librarianship, but the model of it may seem a little bit new wave for some people. Do you feel that is sort of more the direction that libraries are going out into the communities, or I guess I just want you to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to make these big sweeping, that's the direction librarianship is going, as if the things that other librarians are doing isn't important or isn't vital. I feel like it is a direction that public librarianship is going. I should probably explain what I do before I go any further.
Yes,
It's just
you tell us what you do.
So I'm part of the Without Walls team, the WOW team, and we're a team of librarians where we are supposed to work out into the community outside of existing branches. So we do a couple of things. One thing we do is like outreach events. Like if you're at a carnival or a health fair or a job fair and you see a table with like a small collection of books set up and somebody making library cards, that's probably us. We do that. And then the other part of our job that we do is we work with community organizations, and we sort of work on partnerships and long-term solutions, how the library can partner with organizations like the Veterans Association to serve particular communities and serve Fresno County a little bit better, and try to work on those areas where librarians that are working in branches just really don't have the time to do this. They're keeping a branch open, which is an incredibly important job to have that space where people can go, but we kind of have that flexibility to work odd hours, work in odd locations, work on different projects and things like that. And it's been a really exciting thing for me. In one way, it's fairly similar to what I did when I worked in politics, which is there's a lot of community organization involved. There's a lot of community events and community organizations, and kind of trying to look at your home as a larger ecosystem that you exist in, and how you can think more about the other people in your community and what their needs are and how you can be serving them.
So based on your experiences, and this is really a question for both of you guys, what lessons or insights do you feel are important about libraries, are important to share with others, so that they understand librarianship a little bit better, maybe, and also the direction that libraries are headed? I know that's a very packed question there.
I think one thing for the public to keep in mind is that we are yours, very, like, we are your library. Like, this is a resource for you, and we want to know what you want. And libraries do not necessarily have to be one thing to be successful. We can have very traditional library services, and we can have very new ideas in librarianship, and that can exist at the same time. But if we're not serving the community and we're not helping the community, then we haven't really fulfilled our mission. So we want the community to interact with us. We want you to come into the library, basically. We want you to be checking things out. We want you coming to programs. We want you talking to us, when you see us out in the community, we want you to if you see me out at an outreach table, I want you to come up and say hi, and I want to know what you think about the library. I think the library should be like a living, breathing, changing part of the community.
That's true. It still needs but it needs to keep its core values. I just think we still need to have books. I mean, not everybody is going to have an e-reader, or they're going to have a computer at home either, and that's something that we provide for people that do not. One instance I remember at Selma, we had someone had given us not a grant, but something like that. They gave us, so we bought 2 computers and made a homework center. This is before we had more computers around. And this one young lady, she was in high school, and she was at that looking at her email, and all of a sudden she let out a great big whoop and got up and rushed out with her friends. And I went and looked over to see what she was looking at, and there was a letter. She'd gotten an email from UCLA or someplace that said she had been accepted. She was getting a full ride scholarship for 4 years, and she got that information at the library on our computers. I wanted to cry, with happiness for her. I don't know whatever she went on to do, but she got her first hooray letter at the library, and we were part of that. We were part of her life, And that's the kind of thing.
Well, and getting that information that you got into UCLA and you've got this scholarship and your life is about to change, like, should not only be the privilege of kids that have a home computer and can log on to the internet at home. Like, that's what makes a library so important, is that she could access our computer and our internet and her email for free, and she could get the books she needed to study to get to that point in her life for free, and she could have this life-changing experience no matter what her situation was and what her own access to information at home was. And that's so important, and why we need libraries in our community and why we need to keep them open.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
An emphatic yes. All right. Well, you certainly convinced me, although I may be slightly biased on it. Also being a librarian.
A little preaching to the choir a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But hopefully, those who maybe are not as involved with libraries will watch this and take away a new, not necessarily a new appreciation, but a new, some new insights into libraries. And I want to thank you guys for coming out here today and for sitting down to talk to us. And I'm sure that I speak for everyone else when I say that you've given us a lot to think about, and we are very grateful to have been able to learn from you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.